Back again, ladies and gentlemen, another episode this week of Inside IU Softball. I'm Jimmy Cavanaugh, joined, as usual, by head coach Michelle Gardner. Coach, this past weekend we spent some good time in Clearwater, Florida, warm, 80 degrees, and taking part in that NFCA Leadoff Classic. Team goes 3-2. Right now, sitting at a 9-win in 11-game stretch. Lost at the beginning of the weekend and the end of the weekend, but 3 wins in the middle, some close victories. Just talk about how you evaluate your team's performance this weekend, some things you liked, and some things you'd like to see improve.
Well, obviously, to come home 3-2, I was happy with that because in comparison with the weekend before, we just really didn't hit as well as I would have liked. So sometimes when the hitting's struggling, but the pitching keeps us in ball games, it's a great thing to see because we've needed that. And so to come away with 3 wins was I was pretty excited about that. And the bottom line is everybody we face is tough. So you go into that tournament where most of them have been in postseason. That's kind of how you get invited to that tournament. And we faced some challenging teams in different regions that we haven't maybe seen, but I was happy to come home 3-2.
Yeah, and last week we even talked about getting into those close games and being able to come out with wins there. Mm-hmm. UMass, the first game was a little more comfortable, but the second and third wins that weekend in particular, those were some games that were totally in doubt, going right down to the couple final frames, and you guys managed to pull those ball games out.
Well, and that's the sign of a good team, a team that we're down, but we found a way to win those games. And that's what I've been asking them to do all along, is when it's a tight ball game. We saw that the weekend before with Marshall in 2 games. They were tight games. We found a way to win, and that's what we did. The UMass game, 5-1. But then the next 2 games were tough competition, and we battled and were able to pull them out. So, I felt good about that going into Sunday. I felt pretty comfortable with where we were, and we just couldn't hold up. But that being said, Pacific's a real strong team. So I think we've had each weekend we've had a couple really tough games, and we've been able to be successful for the most part.
And the ball game against Pacific, too, seemed sort of like an outlier because up until that, the pitching had been just unilaterally strong across the board. But when you get back to the hitting, you talked about not seeing quite the level that you'd like to see as far as hitting goes last weekend. The girls seemed to catch some tough breaks there as well because there were a few balls hit well in play, but right at fielders. How do you keep them from getting frustrated, keeping that mindset to be at a level where they can't execute there?
Well, this week we've gone back to, some mechanics, some simple hitting mechanics, things to try to make them feel more comfortable in the box, and, seeing pitches. That's kind of what it's about, but we've spent a lot of time just breaking it back down a little bit, because sometimes teams go through that where you're kind of on a roll and everything's clicking, and all of a sudden, it's not quite clicking, but we weren't quite clicking and we were still able to win. And that to me are the signs that I want to see of where the program's going. So, obviously we've gone back a little bit and kind of changed up our hitting this week a little bit, but going into this weekend, obviously we're going to face some pretty strong teams, top 25 teams again, and the bottom line is we need to go and compete.
Really glad you went there because that was my next question. The Easton Invitational this weekend, you obviously play some 2 really tough teams out of the box with Pauley and Fullerton. And then you take on a Cal and a Stanford team that you've already seen this year, and then Oregon State in between those. The level of competition there, what are you expecting to see from your team just as far as being able to come out and prepare? I mean, you've had these past 2 weekends, get things going a little bit, get into the flow of the season, and now you've got another chance against some really strong teams.
Well, and that's what I like about our preseason, because, we opened up bang out of and played some pretty tough competition, and then as it's gone, we've still maintained that we're playing good competition, just different regions, and now we get a second opportunity at 2 of those teams. But the 3 of them are in the top 25 or right there close, and so it's one of those things where I feel a little more prepared going into them because we kind of know what to expect. Whereas the first weekend out, it's kind of get the jitters out, see what we've got going. So My pitching has continued to improve each week, which is kind of what we needed to see. And defensively, we're not making a lot of mistakes, but it comes down to you got to be able to score. And so that's the, executing and doing some things. And, I'm looking at a bunch of different people to do different things, because we had, a couple kids who hit real well the first weekend, didn't hit so well this past weekend, but, it's coming together. It's coming together. I don't expect to come out and, at the early part of the season and be right, everybody clicking on all cylinders. That's why we have a preseason going into the Big Ten.
Well, it'll definitely be worth keeping an eye on. It's going to be another fun weekend, another 5-game, 3-day stretch. We're getting used to these, and we'll see exactly what happens. IU right now 10-5, going into a tough portion of their schedule. Should be a fun watch. For Coach Michelle Gardner, I'm Jimmy Cavanaugh, reminding you catch all those games this weekend on IUHoosiers.com. I'll have the call there. Until then, folks, good night, travel well. Thanks for watching.